This is the Justice Fighter Podcast. With attorney Gerald Griggs. Where we have conversations on social justice, civil rights, and political news that affects us all. Let attorney Griggs put you on game. Only on the Justice Fighter Podcast, y'all.
What's going on, y'all? It's attorney Gerald Griggs, a Justice Fighter, back on the Justice Fighter Podcast on the Justice Media Network. And guys, I know, it's been about a month since I've been on the podcast, and for good reason. We've been running this race that many of you have heard about for State Confernce President of the Georgia NAACP, so I've been focused on that. But I wanted to bring somebody on that's very special that we can introduce to all of you, and the person that I'm going to go ahead and claim will be my first vice president of the State Confernce. I want to introduce you guys to Tequeria Barrett. She is a phenomenal organizer with the State Confernce and with the New Georgia Project, and she's a candidate for first vice president. Introduce yourself to the people.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Attorney Gerald Griggs, for having me on this podcast this afternoon. It's a pleasure, it's an honor, and it's also an honor to consider me as your first vice president. My name is Tequeria Barrett. I'm 28 years old, and yes, I am running for first vice president of the Georgia NAACP State Confernce. It's time.
Yeah, so what made you want to get involved in the NAACP? I know you were a member up in Michigan and you came down here to Georgia, but what made you want to get involved in Georgia?
Yes, I've been in this movement since I was 18 years old. So it's about 10 years now. It's my purpose. It's a lifestyle, you know. I moved to Georgia about 4 years ago, and I saw some things that were going on that I wasn't okay with. A lot of black bodies in our backyard that were going unaccounted for, to include Ahmaud Arbery. I had seen the video footage of what happened to him while jogging in Brunswick, Georgia. And I said, you know what? I got to get back out there. I got to get back in the movement. I've got to make sure that, what happened in Brunswick, Georgia doesn't happen to anyone again, if I can help it. So that's really what led me to the State Confernce. I saw a post on Twitter. Interesting story. I saw a post on Twitter from the Georgia NAACP, who were at the time highlighting what had happened in Glenn County. And I sent them a DM. I said, hey, I know you don't know me, but, I'm new here, but I'm not new to this movement. And instead of getting a reply, I ended up getting a follow from former President James Woodall. And I was like, okay, this is the state president. I'm going to send the same DM to him too. I said, hey, I want to sit down with you. There are some things that I think we can put in place to really continue to amplify what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. And he said, okay, I'll welcome a sit down. Welcoming a sit down turned into me joining the communications team, to stepping up into being a communications chairwoman for the Georgia State Confernce, working through general elections, working through the Ahmaud Arbery case, protests, rallies. It really changed my entire outlook, and it continued to be a lifestyle from that point on.
And that's awesome, and that kind of underscores, why it's so important we have these new platforms, because but for Twitter and the activity of the former president, Major Woodall, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And so here we are on the Justice Fighter Podcast talking about our vision for, the new breed and new blood in the State Confernce. So that's just awesome. You becoming first vice president will be historic. I don't think there's ever been a young woman who has been under the age of 30 to be elected to be the vice president of the State Confernce, first vice. And that would be historic, especially what's happening here in the country with Black Girl Magic running around the country, and black women particularly doing phenomenal things. They saved the election in Georgia. They saved the soul of the country. And now they've put a Supreme Court justice on the bench. So, I mean, those are some exciting shoes to follow, and I'm just excited that you will be following that. But just kind of tell the people how historic that would be.
Man, it's something you think about. You know, I always had a passion for helping people. I always knew my worth at a very young age. Thankful for my grandmother, my late grandmother, who had passed in the middle of the pandemic to COVID-19. But you know, she really, her and my mother poured these things into me, my history, my bloodline, my roots, who I was as a Black woman, how it was important to always stand up for myself. How you know, I would be growing up in a what would be perceived as a patriarchal society, and how I needed to make sure that I planted my feet and I kept moving regardless. And so I took those tools and I kept those with me all the way up to where I am now. It's a certain level of confidence as a Black woman that you have to have when stepping up to the plate in this new era of civil rights. And so I'm blessed. I'm still that young girl from the Midwest, but I'm stepping into this new journey that feels reassuring for my people. It feels liberating, and I'm just excited that I'm able to be a vessel for my people in this movement for change.
That's awesome. That's awesome, and you're so humble. But let's talk about some of the work that you've already done. You know, a lot of the organizing around Ahmaud Arbery, you were in the command center. You were helping to push out the comms and get the marches together. You know, y'all had one of the biggest marches in Georgia with the March on Georgia.
Yeah.
We went to the Capitol. You were present at the signing of the new hate crime legislation here in the state of Georgia. I mean, these are just a few of the things that you've done already,
Yeah.
and that was just as the comms chair.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine the ideas that you have for the first vice president's position. But tell the people some more of the work that you've already done.
Yeah. Well, I started working with New Georgia Project shortly after assisting the State Confernce in Georgia. And originally I was working on a campaign entitled Agenda for Young Georgians, which was essentially uplifting young voices so that we may have a say-so in the state's political process. The age range was between like 13 and 29 years old. So, I mean, we're talking about canceling student loan debt. We're talking about dismantling the school to prison pipeline. That then led to me being a field organizer in the New Georgia Project, where I currently am now, where, I mean, I have about 10 canvassers that work under me, where we are door knocking, phone banking, getting people registered to vote, and really continuing this movement. That is the topic of conversation right now, is mobilizing our young Georgians to the polls and what that may look like. So I've brought a team of young people with me. We don't have anyone over, I believe, 20 years old working under me, because I stress to them the importance of being a young Black man and Black woman in this movement and how their voice matters. And so I encourage them, you know, hey, when you're requesting people to get rides to the polls, or you're you know, trying to motivate them to get over this voter fatigue that we're experiencing these days. You know, share your story, be a truth teller, and also be unapologetically yourself in this movement. That's what matters. And so voting rights is my main mission right now, but I've also organized around voting rights rallies. I've attended General Assembly meetings where you have local officials literally trying their hardest to keep us suppressed and oppressed. I've seen it firsthand. I was just a couple weeks ago down in Atlanta for the anniversary of the Atlanta student protest movement, with some members of the Georgia's Youth and College Division, other youth in the area. And I mean, it's been beautiful to see how far we've come in this movement, and how far more we have to go as young people.
And that's awesome, and that's all frontline work.
Yeah.
That we can talk about that happened in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when people ask you about your resume, you can just simply tell them Google.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something more recently that you've been helping with. You've been helping with the Clayton County NAACP organized around Kenneth Herring's case. Kind of tell us about what that's like and how you've been integral in that.
Oh man. First of all, shout out to NAACP Clayton County branch. President Cinnamon Baldwin is a phenomenal woman. She actually is my mentor as well. She is also from Detroit, so she's been able to give me a sense of guidance in how to bridge the gap between that Midwest persona that we carry as leaders and intertwine that and integrate that with the movement here in Georgia. Kenneth Herring, man, reminds me a lot of my grandfather as I've been learning more and more about his story on the back end. 62-year-old unarmed black man was murdered by a 21-year-old Caucasian woman, Hannah Payne. I had read up on the story, but I didn't read as deep into it until I actually got full-fledged into it, doing press releases and orchestrating press conferences for the Clayton County branch. And I've got to tell you, that story truly moved me because it's something that happens in our backyards every day, that go unnoticed, untalked about. It's so much turmoil that continues to happen in our community. And, I said, well, I might be young and I'm going to do my research and I'm going to figure out what's going on. How can we work as a collective in this movement to make sure that these stories don't go untold, make sure that we get justice for this family? His baby brother, Mr. Keith Herring, amazing man, spoke very highly of his brother and who he was as a man. All of these sorts of things kind of tie me into, or remind me, I would say, of why I continue to do this movement. So I started working on doing press releases. We actually held a youth forum around that, in which I made sure that I would be a part of, to really touch the youth. This is something that's on their TV screens and their social media channels all day long. But oftentimes we don't get an opportunity to really hear what they have to say about the things that they're seeing and how they feel about it. And so we offered up an opportunity for them to speak. It was an amazing forum. Shout out to Kwame Abernathy, Attorney Joe Griggs, who was also in attendance in the Clayton County branch for that.
And that's just awesome, the work that you are amassing, so quickly at such an age where you have the passion and the wisdom and the energy all at the same time. So I think people need to understand that about the new generation that's coming up. So, this election has gone on for a little while, and we're pushing towards the end. Saturday, April the 23rd, from 9 to 2 o'clock is the election. But what words would you offer to the State Confernce if they were listening to this platform about what, an administration with you in it leading would look like?
That's a great question. I take a lot of, and I don't talk about it often, but I listen to the older generations. I'm thankful for the outpouring of their history, their wisdom, their teachings, and I use that to my advantage when stepping into these sorts of leadership roles. I do also believe that a leader should be both a student and a teacher. I took my time to learn from you all. I took my time to watch you all as you moved, and I took notes, and I said, okay, now how can I be an addition to that legacy? What would that look like with me in there? And so I said, okay, I feel like I bring fresh fire, fresh perspective. I'm knowledgeable, but I'm also on the ground. I'm connecting with people on the ground, particularly young people who need to hear what the older generation has to say, need to continue to watch you all, but also it's a two-way street, right? So As you pour into us, I would welcome the opportunity to pour back into you all the things that you've taught me. And I think that is more than anything my main mission. There's a lot of, I feel like, brokenness in this association, but more so in this movement. People have become divided. People have become lost. People don't know who to trust or what to do. And I remember growing up and my grandmother telling me how NAACP was that safe haven. I remember stories about my grandmother being in the Black Panther movement. I remember Detroit protests. And, all of that has led me up to here. But that's what keeps my fresh fire. That's what fuels my passion to keep going. We always say it's a lifestyle, but it's also my purpose. And so I just don't see an organization that would stand in the midst of a young person who's simply trying to serve her purpose and in the best way that she can, and with all parties included. We deserve a seat at the table. I think that it's time to pass the torch. I know that may be difficult. I know that may be risky because you don't know what can happen when you put something as big as this type of legacy in the hands of a young person. But I welcome their feedback always on the ground, in meetings, and so on and so forth. So, like I said, it's a two-way street. I'm here for them, but I also ask that they be there for me too. I'll certainly need that moving forward.
That's awesome. And what I would remind my listeners, the ones that are just joining for the first time or the ones that have been listening to the Justice Fighter podcast for a long time, you have to remember that in the old movement, most of the leaders were between the ages of 15 and 30.
Yeah.
And so when you understand that how successful that movement was, you have to have the same type of room for this movement. I remember my mentor, John Lewis, joining Dr. King when he was 13, 14 years old. And so, and then went on to be with the Freedom Riders. And C.T. Vivian was in his 20s. Dr. King was in his 20s. So when we have this conversation about history, we need to ground it in the actual facts of history. Mm-hmm. There are three generations always at work. There's the wisdom generation, there's the professional generation, and there's the energy generation. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm in the professional generation, and I know what energy looks like. But I also respect my elders and have been poured into, and I think it would be a disservice for any organization not to, one, pour into the next generation, but also give them space and grace to lead.
Yeah.
Because this movement is affecting the lives of young African Americans, period. They're the ones on the front lines. They're the ones being brutalized. They're the ones that are watching these viral images of black bodies being brutalized in the streets, just like what happened up in Grand Rapids a couple days ago. And they need to be on the front lines leading. And so that's why I'm honored to endorse you. I believe that you have the energy necessary to lead right now. But I want to, give you the guidance as a state conference president that you would need because this is the young people's movement. So we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
We had an incident happen in Cobb County the other day. It was last Wednesday. And you were instrumental in getting the Cobb branch involved and getting the word out. I want you to talk a little bit about what happened in Marietta. Unfortunately, you were under the weather, so you weren't there physically, but you could definitely feel your spirit there. And then after it happened, you can definitely see the work that you've done with the virality of this story. But tell the people what's happening.
Yeah. So Marietta City Council decided that they did not necessarily want to honor Juneteenth. We had a city councilwoman of a Marietta, last name Richardson, Carolyn Richardson, and she wanted to propose an idea of Juneteenth being recognized as a city holiday, which would include citizens of Marietta receiving holiday pay for this. We had two city councilmen who, of course, were not of color, opposing the idea. and instead throwing in the idea of recognizing Veterans Day as a city holiday instead. It then the next day went to a vote. It was approved, and then it was immediately vetoed moments later by Mayor Tumlin. So, I mean, that sent Cobb County NAACP into a frenzy, because why shouldn't we openly recognize something that has been so instrumental, and also, it directly signals this sort of like disrespect, I would say, to our people when you don't honor these sorts of things, especially if it's already being recognized as a federal and statewide holiday. I just
And
didn't
county.
see I didn't see the purpose for it, why the veto happened. And after that, young people took to Twitter.
Yeah, the Twitter fingers got to working, and when I say it went viral, I mean
Yeah.
it went really viral. I mean, right now on Google, it has its own section. If you Google Marietta, it has its section about the mayor.
Yeah.
And so people were calling, they were tweeting, they were Facebooking, they were Instagramming, and the mayor decided to do what?
Literally decided to recant his entire veto. And so now it's being reconsidered to both honor Juneteenth as a city holiday and Veterans Day as a city holiday. And I mean, it goes back to amplifying these sorts of things. These stories have gone untold. I can't imagine if I wasn't there, if Attorney Joe Griggs weren't there, if Cobb County NAACP were not present, and a huge long list of supporters were not in the midst and had their hands in on that situation specifically, I'm sure that veto would have remained permanent.
Absolutely, and shout out to President Gerald Grimes from the
Definitely.
Cobb County NAACP, and the former president and one of my sheroes in the movement, Deanne Bonner,
Yes.
who is historic in Cobb. You know anything about Cobb County activism, Deanne Bonner is that person. Again, it's just always wonderful to be surrounded by so much black girl magic. I would call it black woman excellence.
Yes.
But when you understand what happened on Wednesday, we were there. We got there about 5 o'clock, sat outside for a little while, then went inside around 6 o'clock. Actually got to see Mount Perrin Christian Academy receive honors for winning the women's state basketball championship. Wow. Shout out to Jessica Fields, Justin Fields' little sister, star of that team. And then to go into actual session and have to sit there till about 11:15. And I was wondering, I'm like, what's taking so long? This would have been the first item on the agenda. Mm-hmm. And then when they finally got there, it moved expeditiously, to quote a good friend of mine, quickly to pass it. And we were hyped. You guys can see it on Twitter. We were hyped, yeah. And then, boom, he vetoed it in real time. You could hear the groans. Oh.
Yeah.
And so then, being the leader that she is, shout out again to President Grimes for taking the podium and taking them to task.
Listen.
She read them their rights for real. Yeah. And then several other members of the NAACP got up, read them their rights. And then, of course, I had to say a few things, being that, was basically raised from 12 to 30 in Cobb County. I had to say a few things, but it was just awesome to see the people pushing back in real time. And then once we got home and the next day we started tweeting, we started letting people know what happened. We started hearing from around the country that, we're not doing this anymore. People forget, like, Freedom Summer 2020, we learned that, when we fight, we win. Yeah. So people weren't about to take this sit down, and they called the mayor to task, and so now he's called a special session of city council to revisit Veterans Day and Juneteenth. And let me be clear. I am the son of a Vietnam veteran. I'm the grandson of a World War II veteran. I support veterans. But I support all the veterans.
Yeah.
And when you understand that black people have been fighting for this country since the inception of this country, first person to die was Crispus Attucks in the Revolutionary War. Don't come with the false flag of, we need to celebrate the troops. We celebrate the troops. We celebrate the Harlem Hellfighters. We celebrate the Tuskegee Airmen. We celebrate the Buffalo Soldiers. We're not just talking about, one shade of soldier here. But, to equate Veterans Day, which is actually Armistice Day, which only celebrated World War I veterans at first, with Juneteenth, the actual formal celebration of the last slaves to get their freedom. If you understand what happened, Emancipation Proclamation, 1863, Lincoln freed the slaves through an executive order, and then it didn't make it to Texas until 2 years later. And so once they realized that they were free, Texas celebrated this and have been celebrating it for over 100 years, June the 19th, when they received word. And then, of course, the rest of the South has been celebrating. I've been celebrating Juneteenth for about 20 years. My uncle always instilled in me what it was. And so for Marietta, the middle of the metro area, in the blackest, bluest county in Georgia now, to do that was an atrocity. And I'm just shout out to all of the activists that were present. Shout out to the citizens. Shout out to, and people always say, man, and I get tired of this. They always say, what is the NAACP doing? Well, the Cobb County NAACP just sent a message.
Yeah.
The Clayton County NAACP is sending a message.
Bartow
County NAACP sent a message. And if y'all know anything about Freedom Summer 2020, the Glenn County NAACP, the Brunswick NAACP sent a message. So when y'all ask about what is the NAACP doing in Georgia, the Georgia State Confernce, there are some very strong branches in the Georgia State Confernce. So I would strongly suggest, if you are not a member and y'all always asking me, Griggs, how can we get involved? Join the NAACP. Yeah. Join a branch. Yes. Run for an office in the branch. Get involved in the committees, because the work of the NAACP is done in the committees and the branches. But also on Saturday, I need for y'all to wake up your cousin and your auntie and all of them and tell them there's an election going on. We need 244 votes. That's the number of delegates. I need y'all lighting up social media saying we want Attorney Griggs and we want First Vice President, I'm claiming it now, First Vice President Barrett to win, because that's what it's going to take. What do you want to tell them, TQ?
Definitely. It's time. It's time, Georgia. We need leaders that's going to be on the ground with us. We need leaders that's going to step up to the plate. We need transparency. We need accountability. We need relationship. And more importantly, we need people that know what they're doing on the ground. They know what's going on in the state of Georgia. They're organizing under the Georgia Dome. They're organizing on the front lines. They're ready to build these coalition efforts. We've been silent for some time, and it's time to awake the giant, and that is the Georgia NAACP.
So you heard it here. It's time to wake the giant up. The giant's been slumbering for about 8 months.
Napping.
Taking a nap. But we're going to wake the giant back up. And y'all know what happens when the giant is woke. Y'all always talking about it. Oh, I wish the NAACP was like what it was in the 40s or the 50s or the 60s or the 70s. Well, let's make the Georgia State Confernce what it was in 2020.
Yeah. When
we had marches and rallies and protests, and when we were calling on elected officials and making them sign legislation that was historic. Ahmaud Arbery anti-hate legislation in Georgia. We had a new civil rights act in Georgia. That was all the Georgia NAACP, okay? And so let's get back to that, and then let's go to a whole nother level. You know, on the campaign trail, I've been talking about transparency and accountability, and I've been talking about action. Y'all know I'm about that action, boss. You know, and what I would like to say is I'm opening up my platform so that more people can join. You're always asking, how can we get involved? When are we going to know about the next rally? When's the next time y'all going to Brunswick? When's the next time y'all going to Rome? When's the next time y'all going to D.C.? Join the State Confernce through a branch. There are 100 branches in Georgia. Hopefully when I'm done, there'll be 159 branches in Georgia. Y'all need to join the branch. If you live in rural Georgia, trust me, it's a car ride away. We'll be right on down there. If you live in the metro area, we just hop on 20, ride around. 285, ride around 20 to go east and west, 85 and 75 to go north and south. It's nothing for us to get in the car. Tequeria, tell them about when y'all was in the car. What were y'all doing in the car?
2020 was a very interesting year. I mean, when I tell y'all, I literally uh, was thrown into this movement. I was thrown into the water. They said, okay, you say you want to come work? Okay. Next thing I know, was in the middle of Cuthbert, Georgia.
Cuthbert, y'all.
Cuthbert, Georgia, a small rural town on the outskirts of Metro Atlanta, about maybe 3 hours from here. It was myself, our other comms director at the time, Crystal Greer. Shout out to you if you're listening. Former President Woodall, and then we had another individual in the car with us. And when I tell you, it going to that rally and being in Cuthbert, Georgia was like stepping back in time, y'all. Mm-hmm. It was for Kobe Edwards. 17-year-old boy was murdered at the hands of police. And so we ended up going down there to support the Georgia NAACP at that unit. And I've got to tell you, I mean, we might have been the only black folk out there. But we didn't care. It was, hey, we showing up. They said they needed us. They called on President Woodall, and he said, come on, TQ, we going. And in that same car ride there, we were doing a CNN interview for Ahmaud Arbery, actually. So it's so much more that we can do. But also, it just goes to show you how much our units need us, and we need to be stressing urgency. If they need something, we need to show up, and we need to be there on the ground and active. When they say pull up, we're there. But that was a different experience for me, especially coming from the Midwest and being in more of a diverse area, to Metro Atlanta, more of a diverse area, and then going to Cuthbert, Georgia. That was probably my first real realization, like this is different. This is something that needs to change. By the way, I did not see any hospitals. So when we talk about wins and voting rights and advocating for Black lives, we also need to advocate for healthcare. We need to put some of these Black hospitals back into rural Georgia, because I did not see any for miles.
Exactly. And so, whether this is Cuthbert, Georgia, or Baxley, which is in Appling County, we haven't forgot about any of these cases, Douglas, Georgia, we are going to be highly visible and very active in the state conference. And so what we're asking is for you to do a couple things. One, we want you to send this episode of the Justice Fighter podcast to all your friends. Tell them they need to listen. They need to understand why it's important to join the NAACP. If you're already a member of the NAACP, why it's important to make sure that you vote on Saturday, all up and down the ballot. Make sure you vote for myself. Make sure you vote for TQ. Make sure you vote for President Richard Rose, because we need somebody that's going to be making sure that we are very transparent and accountable to the funds that you guys trust us with. We will be very accountable to the funds. A lot of individuals on the ballot, Larry Lockett, shout out to him. Shout out to a lot of people, but I'm putting the stamp of approval on TQ for first vice president. I'm putting the stamp of approval on my mentor, the one that y'all seem to think I'm the one that's causing all trouble in Georgia. No. Richard Rose. Good trouble. Richard Rose started it. He introduced me to some people who taught me what I needed to know. So I'm putting my stamp of approval on Richard Rose. There are so many other very good candidates that, you'd be very well served to vote for them. Of course, Karen Renee, James Stocks. It's a lot of them. Shout out Dexter Benny in Bartow County. If I forgot your name, charge it to my head, not my heart, because we've been in this battle for 9 months now. But I think that we can put together a strong slate that can move the state forward. I would be remiss if I didn't say this on my platform about individuals that are running. Truth tell is this. Y'all know my work. Y'all know the work I've been doing since 1999. I've been in this movement since 1999. We took down a Confederate flag at Emory University. Mr. Griggs is not about talk. I'm not about that talk. I'm about action. Google me. For individuals that are saying things, I hear you. All I'm going to say is this. I've never stopped working. I will not stop working. I love this association. I am a Silver Life member. I didn't say subscribing. I didn't say paying on installments. I said I'm a Silver Life member of the NAACP. We were on April the 30th, we will be at Stone Mountain dealing with the white supremacists that want to continue to take us backward. We will continue to fight any governor that wants to reduce our voting rights and take us back to a far gone era. Those are the things that I've already done. When Brian Kemp was running the first time and he was the suppressor in chief, we were outside. When Donald Trump kept coming into this city, into this state, we were outside. When the historic 2020 election happened, we came from outside to go inside to vote, and then we were back outside.
Yep.
2021, when we flipped the Senate, we were outside. So I would put my record up against anybody. But it's not about me. It's about moving the state conference forward. And I think that with me and TQ and Richard and several others, we can do exactly that. So I opened up the platform, Justice Fighter Podcast. Again, I've been off for about a month. Y'all know I had to make sure I stayed on this campaign trail. But any last words, TQ, as we take them out?
Thank you so much, Griggs, for this opportunity to really share my truth. I don't get a chance to talk about myself a lot. I'm so embedded in the work. But it is a pleasure to be on this platform, to share this platform with you, to continue to push this movement forward. And also, we have to make sure we give you a stamp of approval, too. Please make sure that you vote for President Attorney Gerald Griggs for the Georgia NAACP State Confernce. We need it. He's a powerful man. I'm proud to call him my mentor as well. I think the question, we always ask ourselves is what have you done? But Griggs is an accurate reflection of what have you done for me lately. So from one young person to another, I appreciate you. I uplift you. And let's continue the work. May 24th is the primaries. That's the next step. Outside of the April 23rd election, we're ready. And again, I'll close. First Vice President Tequeria Barrett. Definitely won't let you down, Georgia. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And again, she has my stamp of approval, and she's right. The most important thing is May the 24th, and then in November. We got to get people back out, got to get them motivated, got to talk to them, got to be with them. It's the ministry of presence. We have to be present with them. You're not going to get people out just by yelling at them, telling them go vote. You got to go be with them. You also got to hold some elected officials accountable. Remember, I told y'all 2020, if y'all went to vote, 2021, I was going to hold some people accountable. I already been to Washington twice already. So we're going to make sure we hold individuals accountable. We're going to make sure we speak truth to power. We're going to make sure that we are transparent. Again, for those that are on the fence, simple Google search will tell you what I've already done, what I'm capable of doing, what I will continue to do, what I did before the NAACP, what I did in the NAACP, what I will continue to do as a justice fighter. But I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for you to empower us to do the work of protecting the least of us. Because it's going to take people with courage to stand on that front line. Whether that's standing on the front line in front of the 3%ers with Chris Hill, whether that's facing off with the alt-right and Richard Spencer, whether that's making sure that it will never, ever be a president who said they were good people on both sides in Charlottesville. These are things. In the words of my dear mentor, our dearly departed John Lewis, the most powerful nonviolent weapon we have is the power to vote.
Yes.
We're asking for you to exercise that power to vote, to make sure that we are the first vice president and the president of the state conference. And then we will mobilize, as we have already started, to get y'all out for the primaries. And then in November, we're going to make this thing shake again. See, they think we can't do it again. But we were there, what was that, Tuesday?
Yeah.
With the coalition
Yeah.
that turned out to vote
Yep.
at the King Center. Again, guys, we on the front lines. Seriously.
Yeah.
We had about, 150, 200 of our wisdom generation marching down the street on Auburn Avenue.
Faith-based leaders were there.
Yeah, the faith-based leaders.
SCLC.
Black Voters Matter. Reverend Bryant was there. The AME Bishop, presiding bishop of the 6th District, Reginald Jackson, was there. A lot of elected officials who want to get our vote were there. But most importantly, it was our wisdom generation. They were so fired up to march down the street, y'all. They were fired up. I truly love marching with them because they were fired up. But young folks, I can't wait. It's about to be warm outside again, y'all. Freedom Summer 2022.
We coming for y'all.
We coming. So again, this is Attorney Griggs, a justice fighter. Hopefully, I'll see y'all real soon outside. We're definitely gonna see you Saturday when we make sure we win this election, and then we're gonna get back to work. This is Attorney Gerald Griggs, a justice fighter, here on the Justice Fighter Podcast on the Justice Media Network. For all of my podcast episodes, just Google Justice Fighter Podcast. It's on all streaming platforms, and make sure you send it to your friends. Make sure that you are ready to mobilize, and we are going to make sure that when we fight, we win. I'll talk to y'all later.
This is the Justice Fighter Podcast. Justice Fighter Podcast. With Attorney Gerald Griggs. Attorney G. Where we have conversations on social justice, civil rights, and political news that affects us all. Let Attorney Griggs put you on game. Only on the Justice Fighter Podcast, y'all.